Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through creating a series of video presentations for the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development program, and in particular the AWD 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class. The book that will be used for the class for the fall 2019 semester, which is what I'm basing this off of, is shown on the screen. It is Pro ASP.NET MVC 5, an A-Press text by Mr. Adam Freeman. We are working our way through Chapter 19 of 27, and I'm up to page 543, using a custom action name. So, usually the name of the action method determines the action that it represents. The index action method services requests for the index action. You can override this behavior by using the action name attribute, which is shown here for the customer controller. In fact, let's just grab the whole shebang. All right. In this listing, we have applied the attribute, the enumerate, as you can see right here, the action name, to the list method, passing in a parameter value of enumerate. When the action invoker receives a request for the enumerate action, it will now use the list method to service it. You can see the effect by starting the application, going over to the customer enumerates URL. So let's try that. Now, if we go back again to customer list, it will not work because we've done an override. The two main reasons you might want to override a method name in this way: number one, you can then accept an action name that wouldn't be legal as a C# method name. And second, if you want to have two different C# methods that accept the same set of parameters and should handle the same action name, but in response to different HTTP requests, you can do so. All right, going up to page 545. It is often the case, as mentioned here at the top of the page, that a controller will contain several actions with the same name. This can be for a lot of reasons. In these situations, the MVC framework needs help in selecting the appropriate action with which to process a request. The mechanism for doing this is known as action method selection. It allows you to define different kinds of requests that an action is willing to process. All right. It says you've already seen this in action when I restricted an action from the post attribute when I built the sports score application. I had two methods called checkout, and I used the post attribute to indicate that one of them would be for post requests only. Right there. Now remember, to do this, I believe at least, you have to have a different set of parameters in here. The action invoker is mentioned here on the top of page 546. The action invoker uses action method selectors to resolve ambiguity when selecting an action. There are built-in attributes that work as selectors for the different kind of HTTP requests. HTTP post for post requests, HTTP get for get requests, HTTP put for put requests, etc. Another built-in attribute is non-action, which indicates to the action invoker that a method that would otherwise be considered a valid action method should not be used. So as you can see how we've applied the non-action where we've defined a new action method in our customer controller. The my action method that you see right here will not be considered as an action method, even though it meets all of the criteria that the invoker looks for. This is useful for ensuring that you do not expose the workings of your controller classes as actions. All right, page 547. Action method selectors are derived from the action method selector attribute class, shown here. The action method selector attribute is abstract and defines one method, is valid for request, that you can see bolded on the page. The parameters for this method are a controller context object, which allows the programmer to inspect the request, and a method info object, which can be used to get information about the method to which the selector has been implied. So the author came in and added to the infrastructure folder a new class. That class is called local attribute.cs, and the code is shown on the bottom of page 547 and the top of page 548. The author says here to note on page 548 that he has overridden the is valid for request method so that it returns true when the request originates from the local machine. To demonstrate this, we create a home controller in the example project. All right. The code, we remove the boilerplate code and replace it with the code shown in the middle half of page 548, stuff that's now been highlighted. As the author says right here, we've used the action name attribute, as you can see it right here, to create a situation in which there are two action methods. At this point, the action invoker doesn't have any way to figure out which one should be used when a request for /home/index URL arrives, and it'll generate an error such as the one that's shown on page 547. All right, an ambiguous error. To resolve this problem, the author says you can apply the custom method selection attribute to one of the ambiguous methods, as shown in listing 1921. So we will grab this, local, if we restart the application, and we haven't done that in a while, so we can't. Okay, since we're changing the CS file, we have to do a save all, and we have to run the application again. Remember, if it was just a change to the .cs HTML file, we could leave this up and running and just go back and refresh or reload the browser. Our output, as you can see here, is the same as that shown in figure 19-9 on the bottom of page 549. Now, the author says here, notice the action method disambiguation process. Now that you have seen the inside the action method selector base class, you can understand how the action invoker selects an action method. It starts the process with a list of possible candidates, which are controller methods that meet the action criteria. Then it goes through the following four-step process. Number 1, the invoker discards any method based on name. Number 2, the invoker discards any method that has an action method selector attribute that returns false for the current request. Number 3, if there is exactly one action method left, then that's the one used. Number 4, if there are no action methods with selectors, the invoker looks for those without selectors. All right, that brings us halfway down on page 550, handling unknown actions. Seems like a fine place to stop. And I think we'll do some